start that again. Welcome everybody to our monthly Emerging Technology Community of Interest, our August meeting. We thank you for attending, and we're just going to kind of run through what our show is going to look like today. So for those of you who've been around and seen these missions and objectives, we're getting ready to update this for our next year, for our next program year. So if you are in the working groups, you'll be reached out to for some feedback into that in terms of what our objectives are going to be for the year. But as you can see here, this is kind of what we've been working on for this past year. And thankfully, we're starting to fill out our list of leadership, right, Todd?
We are, long last. Got a lot of leaders.
Yes. So we, as you can see here, for those who are interested, there are still some available positions that we're trying to fill. We're looking for a blockchain government chair, as well as an IoT 5G government chair. If you're interested in either of those, just contact Todd or I or anybody else on the leadership team if you have our email addresses.
And while we're on the screen, I want to give a warm welcome to our newest leader, George Chenkeli, who is the Devops government chair. Hey, George.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to put a name with a face there in this COVID environment. We're glad that you joined.
Looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Great, great.
All right, Nancy, do you have an update on the ACT-IAC activities?
Sure. So I think I mentioned it last month. All the ACT-IAC events are now fully virtual until the end of the year, including our premier, largest conference, which is Imagination ELC. It is spread over 4 days, 4 half days of virtual programming, October 26th to 29th. So I hope you will check it out. And also another addition that I wanted to mention is the acquisition COI. Emerging Technology and Acquisition is one of the 8 COIs within ACT-IAC. They have a member meeting similar to this coming up this Monday, and the topic might be of interest to you. It is leveraging RPA to transform the Federal Acquisition Service. And the speaker for that is Jeff Lau, who is the FAST Commissioner for Region 2. So that will be a great conversation, and it will be useful and meaningful to have our emerging technology folks participate in that. That's all I have. Back to you.
Fantastic. And as for those of you who've heard, we had a Emerging Tech Day at Treasury, which we were very pleased in that event in terms of a whole day focused on AI and having conversation within Treasury and other government participants. We mentioned this because it's, and I think we'll mention it again later, it's something that we do. If you're part of a federal agency and you want our team to come in and do some presentations on various emerging tech or even to a specific one, we offer that up as kind of a road show, if you will, that we do to bring to your agency and show, have a conversation that's more candid within, a safer space if it's just your people. Next month as well, for those of you who don't know or aren't aware, we're finalizing an ethics and bias in AI paper, and along that line, the associates program has been working with us. They're going to host a panel at our monthly meeting next month along this topic, and bring in some speakers to talk to it, as well as I think by next month we'll probably have an announcement, if not sooner, on the release of our paper.
Why is that paper so important?
Who is that voice in the background asking that question? Sandy, you're directly involved in some of that stuff. We're thrilled to have you helping to drive that whole process. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's really, really important. And I think that it's a very important topic, not just for our COI next month, but also I think we're going to hear a lot about that at the ELC. It's not going away. So thank you for your team and helping to pull that together.
If I can just add one thing before you get going, I think you're going to see that a lot of what is happening in the federal forum, if not state and local, will start to be driven by the topic. And hopefully that paper that will come out of this COI will play into a lot of actions that will be taken with language that we will see moving forward in federal contracts. Over.
timing is great with that paper, Sandy.
All right, well, I wanted to introduce Raven Manuel, who also introduced our guest as we go through it. But Raven is coming to us from Smithsonian through the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and has come on board recently as our government co-chair. And she is just bringing forth some great ideas to include this one here, emerging technology and accessibility. And so she's going to run us through some presentation on what we've done in a recent survey. Raven.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. So we have Section 508, ADA, WCAG. These are the various laws and regulations that ensure that the private and public sector spaces where we work and visit and transact business are accessible to those who need specific accommodations, along with those who don't need accommodations. And so what the decision was made that we would try to start that conversation about information access and transparency, which to me is an alternative way to think about accessibility. And the COI fielded a survey to understand the current state of how agencies are addressing challenges that the American public may have accessing government products and services. And so once we understand the current state, then the next step from the survey is to discuss how emerging technologies like augmented reality or virtual reality, AI, can be used as assistive, can't talk today, technologies. And so as Jeremy stated, I'll go through the survey results, and then we'll hear from my good friend Beth Ziebarth, from the director of the Smithsonian Accessibility Program, and she will be talking about her role and how the Smithsonian handles this particular space, as well as some of the innovative projects that she's been had a part of. So you can go to the next slide, please. The survey. Do I have access to do that?
You do, if you want. Otherwise, I can take it back and do it.
Yes, please, because I did not get the prompt to do that. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. So the survey asked several category of questions, and the purpose of the survey was to just get the current state of how agencies were addressing the challenges in this space. We asked about the U.S. Digital Playbook, not that it is a direct, has a direct tie to accessibility, but some of the key plays, the first three at least, actually tie into some of the accessibility guidelines. We also asked organizations about how they're ensuring compliance with accessibility requirements, whether there are resources dedicated to the space, and whether or not accessibility, and I put that in quotes because accessibility is defined differently depending on the organization, the agency, as well as what you're thinking, what the agencies, their strategy, how they think about accessibility. So we wanted to know about how the accessibility played a role in mission critical components. Next slide, please. We received 22 respondents. We had 10 questions, of which the 10th question was just a question to ask permission to contact respondents about the survey if they were willing to give their email addresses and contact information. Of the 22, we had 72%, almost 73% were federal agencies. 22, as you can see, were industry, and then we had a small sliver that was state and local government. Next slide. The first, so the questions appear, they seem to be just scattered around everywhere, and it really was a scattershot to just take sampling of different, get a sampling of different information. So the first thing that we wanted to understand was the websites, right? Because that's how most people access information for services and products. So we asked whether or not the organization had a government website that showed that had access to product, services, or information. And as you can see, 76.2% said they did, 19% said they didn't, and then there were some that said they maybe. And so in the survey results, there's some maybes, and that's because of the way the survey allowed respondents to answer. If a person said maybe, I think that we should just take that as a no, even though it could be a yes, but we'll just take it as a no, because if you don't know for sure, then it's probably a no. So we'd say like a large amount of the, and that goes to show because of the 22 respondents, 70-something% were of government. Then we also asked whether or not they had a website that had commercial products. So, and this was not just private industry. I mean, government agencies could also have services that were of commercial use or private use for products and information. And it was 45%, 45% with 10% saying maybe. So we'll just say that less than half actually had sites that were geared to giving information to the American public that was private or commercial related. Next slide, please. Then we asked about the U.S. Digital Playbook. The U.S. Digital Playbook is a great resource, and the 10 plays in it are about have this best practice of how to think about your technology management. And so we asked whether or not any people were familiar with the playbook or the digital strategy, and 76.2% said they were familiar with that. And of the 76.2%, we asked if they were aware of it. Did they purposefully adopt some of or all of the plays into their IT modernization technology policy? And of that, almost two-thirds, 57.9%, said yes, that they did. So USDS should be proud of themselves because a majority of the respondents said that they were actually using the plays, some or all of them, in their IT modernization policy. Again, the playbook is not directly connected to accessibility, but the first three premises where it says to know your user, to understand, to make it simple for access, as well as to be able to have everything fully represented, those actually speak directly to accommodate, directly speak to accessibility as far as accommodation or access to information. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides are talking about what we asked, are there laws, regulation, or guidelines which drive the IT modernization technology policy? And we received like some overlap, and one of them was the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, or the 21st Century IDEA, which required all executive branch agencies, as you can see on the slide, to modernize their websites, to digitize services, to improve customer experience, and to transition to a centralized shared services platform. And it also uses the guidelines of the U.S. Web Design System. So the 21st Century IDEA really speaks to, is a really great policy to be able to help agencies get to a point where information is accessible and clearly written for the American public to access information. Next slide, please. The other laws and regulations that were mentioned were the Plain Writing Act, which is plainlanguage.gov, that requires agencies to speak in plain English, and I guess that means no acronyms, please, as so that the public can understand that. There's the TechFAR Hub was mentioned a couple of times, which was created by the USDS to help the digital service acquisition. That can be found at this URL. And then it was mentioned the Architectural Barriers Act was mentioned, which requires access to federally owned and leased buildings and facilities to accommodate people that have challenges accessing buildings. Other things that were mentioned were FedRAMP, the Federal Information Technology Reform Act, the Paperwork Reduction Act, and of course, the revised Section 508, WCAG, and human-centered design. Those were some of the oft-mentioned laws, regulations, and guidelines to help ensure compliance. Next slides, please. Then came the ambiguous, don't want to lead the witness questions about accessibility. So the question was, first, do you have a department within your organization that is dedicated to oversee information and content accessibility? And as you can see, 40% said yes, while the remainder said no or maybe. So there seems to be a I would not say that we could make the call that maybe there should be more emphasis and that maybe there needs to be more subject matter experts, but there are agencies, GSA actually, and ACT-IAC. There are a lot of different agencies out there that have that train and help, like TechFar Hub for one, help train and get this type of knowledge and this type of expertise into an organization. Some organizations said that they had a dedicated accessibility team, so without making names. Some actually said that it was distributed, and so that there wasn't one specific thing, but it was incumbent on everyone to actually be aware, depending on what their need was. And then there was a couple that actually said they have the Section 508 office that was dedicated. So that was encouraging. Next slide, please. And the second question about operationalizing accessibility was a question to ask whether or not there were critical areas of the organization where accessibility was essential to the mission. And so one agency answered yes, that their target audience was disproportionately disabled, and accessibility considerations was definitely mission critical. And then the HR contracting in physical spaces, as well as building accessibility. And I think that when most people think of accessibility, the first thing that comes to mind is accommodation for mobility. But there are all sorts of areas. If you were to look at the WCAG, for instance, you'd see that there are cognitive and learning disabilities that need to be accommodated when you are thinking about this space. And this is something that we at the museum actually think about when we are preparing an exhibit or an exhibition. Next slide, please. And I think that's the last slide. So without further ado, so this is why it's very critical and very important that we have experts like Beth at organizations to help lead the way and to guide units like in the Smithsonian on how to not just make the building more accessible, but how to make information, how to make the learning experience and the whole educational experience accessible to people with various different needs. So, Beth, it is up to you if you'd like to share.
Okay, thank you.
If possible, you're welcome. And I will let you do your own little bio and tell people about yourself.
Sure. Just make sure I can get this PowerPoint up here.
Yep, we can see it.
There we go. Does that look okay?
Yes, it does.
Great, thanks.
Great.
So, my name is Beth Ziebarth, as Raven said, and I'm the director of Access Smithsonian. And we recently did a branding project, and we decided that our best possible tagline is "Our future is inclusive," because we are all about inclusive design. Access Smithsonian, just a little background, we are a pan-institutional office, so we work with all 19 museums, the 9 research centers, and the myriad offices that make up the Smithsonian, and we've been around since 1991. We work on policies, practices, and procedures, and we develop guidelines to help implement policies. So, for example, we developed the Smithsonian Guidelines for Accessible Exhibition Design back in 1996, which was a project where we worked with exhibition designers around the institution to apply what was in the federal accessibility laws to exhibitions. And it's a document that has been adopted around the world and translated into a lot of different languages. So it was an early effort to really think about the program side of accessibility, exhibitions being part of the program side. We also do facility and exhibition review, looking to make sure that when we design a new building or we renovate, that we are addressing the accessibility, and same thing with exhibitions. We provide technical assistance on the legal requirements of the various federal accessibility laws. We do a lot of staff and volunteer training. That's a big part of our work in our very small office. It's free, and with several contractors. But we train people, everybody from security officers at the entrance to the museum, who are welcoming visitors in, to docents who are providing tours to visitors who have different types of disabilities, to exhibition designers, and just the whole gamut of different types of jobs within the Smithsonian. We work on visitor access service requests, so if a visitor wants a sign language interpreter or real-time captioning for a program, then we can arrange for that. And we have 5 signature programs that we work on with the rest of the institution. So we're the infrastructure, and the different museums actually carry out the program. So an example is See Me at the Smithsonian, which is a program for individuals with dementia and their care partners. And we're currently doing this online instead of in the museum, which is working out surprisingly well. And actually, we have more people participating now virtually than when we were doing them in gallery, partly because we've taken away some of those barriers that people were experiencing, like with transportation, just getting around in the building. So that's a benefit. And as we start opening museums and we can return to live programs, we're going to continue a number of our online programs because it just is reaching more audience members. We also have a program called Project Search, which is an internship program for young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have a program called Morning at the Museum for families with kids with disabilities. And we have a user expert group that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, and also a Smithsonian Accessibility Innovation Fund, which Raven is very familiar with because the National Museum of African American History and Culture received one of our grants, internal grants, to be able to work on providing verbal description for visitors who are blind or have low vision through an app. She can tell you more about that. It's a very exciting new project. So those are some of the things that we do. And I want to talk about how we view accessibility and inclusion, especially with program design today. So I'm going to talk about a definition of inclusive exhibitions and talk a little bit more about inclusive programming. So an inclusive exhibition is one that is designed to welcome and engage people at the ends of the natural human spectrum of ability, age, and culture, and thus serves all people within the full range of that spectrum. The exhibition provides all visitors on that spectrum an integrated, equal opportunity to benefit from all of its content and presentation. And this is a definition that we have adopted from our colleagues at the Institute for Human-Centered Design, who we do a lot of work with. All aspects of an inclusive exhibition's development and design address inclusion, from initial content development and concept design to fabrication, installation, and maintenance. And this is kind of a mantra of mine that when we are working with Smithsonian staff and all the contractors that help us with things like facilities or new exhibitions, that we need to be thinking about accessibility and inclusion from the very concept of the design through construction. Because if we come in at 95% and are asked to look at accessibility, a lot of times that is way too late to actually incorporate something that should have been thought of back at the concept stage. Inclusion is ingrained into the design of gallery connections to surrounding spaces, physical and emotional layout of spaces, content and the communication of themes, digital and mechanical interactives, graphics, lighting, sound, color, furniture, and media. And media is probably where we're going to focus more today because we're going to talk more about the kinds of things we can do with digital accessibility. An inclusive exhibition meets all the Americans with Disabilities Act standards and regulatory requirements, including, because we are talking to federal agencies here, including Section 508. So it's not just the ADA, but also Section 508. And so we meet the requirements for non-discrimination, integrated settings, physical ability or usability, and accessibility, effective communication, and modifications to policies, practices, and procedures. And any of you working in the federal government recognize these key terms from the laws. It extends design thinking beyond minimum accessibility requirements to ensure that the exhibit's informational and social aspects can be fully and equally experienced by individuals with diverse abilities and ages, as well as mixed age, mixed ability, family and friend groupings. It allows seamless internet interaction and for people with visible and non-apparent disabilities that affect mobility, sensory, communication, and brain-based functions, and provides supplemental programming and features if needed for additional layers of access and inclusion. And the reason why we emphasize the if needed is ideally the design will make it not necessary to have supplemental programming and features. But at times, when you are trying to meet the needs of a wide range of people with disabilities, supplemental programming and features can help you meet people where they are. And a good example is our Morning at the Museum program, where, of course, families with kids with disabilities can visit our Smithsonian museums at any time. But the program allows for us to modify the environment enough to make it much more friendly to families whose kids include have disabilities like autism or intellectual disabilities or other types of sensory processing disabilities. And so that's where having that kind of supplemental programming can be beneficial, as long as the goal is we're introducing families to the Smithsonian and how to visit museums, and they practice with Morning at the Museum, and then they can use those the things that they gain from attending the programming when they visit anytime they want to come. And now that we've been doing this for 10 years, we see our families, the kids are becoming interns at the Smithsonian, the families come all the time. So it has really helped to integrate them into being lifelong museum visitors. So one of the types of technologies that we are using at the Smithsonian currently, and has become actually that much more important while we are experiencing the pandemic, because of trying to guide somebody who is blind or has low vision through a museum and enforce the social distancing and provide the kind of information that somebody will need to be able to have a meaningful and enjoyable visit to a museum. So IRA is a service that is that connects blind and low vision people to trained remotely located agents. They're actually in San Diego, and through an app on your smartphone, IRA delivers instant access to visual information at the touch of a button, enhancing everyday efficiency, engagement, and independence. Straightforward and simple. So it's really, we have a core group of local users who adopted IRA early, like at the beta stage. And we also, are trying to introduce this service to people who have never had the opportunity to use it. We have free minutes at all the Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C. and at the zoo. And otherwise, it is a subscription service. And I'm going to play a short video so you get a better sense of what IRA is like. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how this works. Using your smartphone and the camera on the phone, the IRA agent is able to see where you are, and they can give you directions so you can navigate through an unfamiliar building, and information like how close other people are to you for social distancing. You can get description of objects that are on display. So it is it's something that really provides a good service for people who are blind or have low vision. Oops, stop. All right. Another thing that we have been working on is a digital interactive keypad. This is a STORM interface. And the reason why we are so keen on finding a good digital interactive keypad is that we want to be able to use it with touch screens and other kinds of digital interactive experiences so that we can make those devices or experiences more accessible to a wider range of people. So as you can probably imagine, a touch screen, unless it is really programmed well, is basically inaccessible to somebody who is blind or has low vision. And so you have to have the right kind of programming to work with the keypad, but the keypad can give people the predictability of how to maneuver through an interactive. So we are currently doing this with developing the kind of the prototype of the keypad and its use at the National Air and Space Museum as they redo 20 exhibitions all at once. And if we can get this right through a lot of prototype testing and working with different media companies that are providing experiences for the new exhibitions, then this could be a model for the rest of the institution. And one of the things that is really key in accessibility and inclusion is having consistency. So one of the things we don't want to have is visitors come to the Air and Space Museum, use a digital interactive keypad that helps them go through a touchscreen interactive experience, and then they go to another museum, let's say natural history, and there isn't anything that helps them go through interactive experiences. So consistency is key. It's a big challenge at the Smithsonian. Each of the museums is its own little fiefdom, but I think if we can lead by example of how well this works, especially because we are doing this with the help of people with disabilities and our user expert group, that ideally the museums will adopt this kind of device that will help people get more out of the content that they're putting out on the floor. I put in VR experiences because we have experimented a little bit with this. We did this with a Kusama exhibition a few years ago, where we have the Kusama exhibition, if you didn't experience it yourself, involved these rooms that were pre-built by the artist and her team, and you would go into the room and you would experience something like this, because the whole room is mirrored and the lights are off, and other than what the artwork is doing. And they were built in Japan, and they were built in, some of them back in the 60s or 70s. So the size of the door opening, the size of the ramp inside the room, or runway, I should say, varied. And we knew that we were going to have some difficulty with making the experience accessible to some people who used assistive devices like different types of wheelchairs or a scooter. And so we thought about what our alternatives could be. One of the things that we did is built ramps to the door of the room and of the different rooms. And we also told people what to expect, so they could choose to either view the room from the doorway. They could go in if they wanted to. They would have to back out. That was one of the problems with the width of the runway. It was only 4 feet, and we needed to make sure people knew that they would have to back out. Or if they didn't want to do these things, but still wanted to have the experience, then we could offer them a VR headset, and they could see the room through the VR. And I think one of the things that this experience has raised, and we've been experimenting a little bit with this, is how do we make VR more accessible to people with a range of disabilities? So, for example, we were recently with the Brochure looking at an upcoming exhibition where they initially were going to offer a VR experience. Now they will not be because of the pandemic, but we were thinking about how to provide captions for people who are deaf or have hearing loss of the sounds that are part of the VR experience, and description, and how do we incorporate that in. And I think some of the answers are in gaming. There's so much that's been done in gaming to make it possible for people with different types of disabilities to be able to experience games. So there's good reason to think that we can learn from the gaming industry for VR experiences in museums. I wanted to talk about our user expert group. And so start off just by talking about effective evaluation. We have to really think about how we can purposefully, accurately, and effectively include the knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, skills, and behaviors of visitors with disabilities in our evaluations. And the way that we do that is through contextual inquiry, research, and user experts. So contextual inquiry, I'm trying to move this other screen out of my way so I can read my thing here. Contextual inquiry investigates the intersection between the person and facets of a holistically defined environment. It's a form of user experience research and requires a balance between traditional interviewing, which many people are very familiar with evaluation, and ethnographic observation. So something you may not be quite as familiar with, but it can be a really good way to understand how somebody is using a different component in that exhibition. And it's particularly valuable for understanding people with disabilities in cultural settings. So what is a user expert? A primary user expert has developed expertise by means of his or her lived experience in dealing with the challenges of the environment due to a physical, sensory, or brain-based disability. The user expert is not necessarily an expert in accessibility or inclusion. Their experience lies in their own life experiences. And what can you research through contextual inquiry? It can be everything from physical environments indoors and outdoors, like we did a tour of the zoo with different groups of people with disabilities to better understand what kinds of accessibility barriers they were encountering or what worked well for them. So contextual inquiry in that situation was looking at the physical environment. The digital environment, websites, apps, videos, virtual tours, and this is actually where we've been spending most of our time. It can be, we've been doing a lot of work with Air and Space on the media that they're developing for the new exhibitions. And one of the things that is, we find that we always learn something new in bringing in different people with different disabilities to test out a prototype ourselves. But the media developers they've never had this experience. Even if they've worked with people with disabilities before, they've never really had the opportunity to have people with different types of disabilities really try out their media in a setting where we can do this contextual inquiry evaluation. And so it's been really a powerful tool for us. You can also use it for evaluating services and programs. So one of the other applications we've used is we've been prototype testing things like tactile experiences in museums, which of course during the COVID-19 era is going to be a little bit different, but when we develop really good tactile experiences, it's because we have worked with user experts who can tell us more about what the experience is like. We have recruited people from the DC metropolitan area to be part of our local database of user experts, and we also have the advantage of working with the Institute for Human-Centered Design in Boston and they have a very large group of user experts too. So we can make use of both. The user experts are invited to participate in particular evaluations and are paid a small stipend, sometimes travel costs for their efforts. It's very, we found that our user experts really enjoy doing this. They'd like to be able to help the Smithsonian come up with better experiences for people with the types of disabilities that they might have themselves. And so it's not a hard sell to find user experts. And for out-of-town evaluations, can contact organizations and disability leaders for recommendations and introductions. And the way that we do this is we actually have people do what they would do in a particular museum. So we would, if we were testing a touchscreen interactive, for example, we would put the touchscreen interactive up on screen and ask the person with a disability to just go through the screen. And our job is to really kind of stand back, observe, prompt where necessary, ask the questions that the media designer might have, but not to really lead the person with disability through the experience, but really see what it is that, how they're experiencing it. And we take a lot of notes, and we oftentimes will videotape it so that we can make sure that we can really document what happened during the process. And that is part of what this document is really important for us to get that information down so that we can share it. I think that, as I said, we've learned a lot as people who work people with disabilities every single day. It's surprising how much we learn, but it's really important also when people who are new to working with people with disabilities learn. And if we can take that information and share it with others so that when they have a common kind of issue with something that they're designing, that they can use that information. So at this point, I will stop and happy to take any questions if that's appropriate at this point, Raven, or if you would rather go on with your program and ask questions later.
Sorry, I was on mute. I actually received a question. Is it okay to ask that, Todd?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Raven.
Cool. Someone wanted to know, are we using GSA for hardware sourcing?
At the Smithsonian?
Yes. For what, like when you were going through the dial pad and the touchpad, are we going through private contractors or going through like GSA for that?
Yeah, it probably depends on the project. I don't know what Aaron Space is doing as far as acquiring those keypads. It certainly would make sense if we're trying to promote the idea of using a keypad throughout the Smithsonian, that we do it in a way that, like through GSA instead of each and every media company that we work with doing the purchasing. So.
Gotcha. That was all the questions that I saw that came up for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Beth.
All right. Awesome. You're very welcome. Let me see if I can get out of stop sharing so you can go back to your screen there. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Actually, we did have one internal question about that. Would any of your slides be made available for us, Beth, so that we can insert them into this deck? We like to share it with the participants and folks who weren't able to join.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, terrific. Well, Raven, maybe you, Jeremy, and I can get that squared away.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Oh, great.
All right, Todd, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure, absolutely. So Jeremy sort of prefaced this with all of you just a few moments ago, but the Emerging Technology Community of Interest goes out to agencies and does these half-day forums where we come in on site, bring the program folks, the business folks, acquisition folks, IT folks, environment close to the agency, like to invite from within government. And it's intended to be a very candid discussion that allows, all the folks in the agency who are interested in emerging technology to ask questions and find out ways to maybe, think about bringing some of this technology in, or where is it being done that we can learn from, and so forth too. So we bring other government use cases in and go through a day like that, and really top it off with, let's think about, if you want to do this sort of thing, how within your organization do you go about buying this kind of approach, and more importantly, starting small so that you can take advantage of lessons learned quickly. So Jeremy and I just recently, as he pointed out, assembled one for Treasury, and they wanted to narrow the focus just to AI, especially around the financial space, and I thought it was very effective. So anyway, this for the agency folks on the phone, and certainly for any industry folks who work closely with agencies where this may be of interest, please share. Jeremy and I are happy to work through whatever kind of forum setup is appropriate for that group. So I'll hand the ball back to you, Jeremy, on that one.
All right, and as an example, for those who are interested, this was the brochure that Treasury put together, kind of showing off, what the event was going to have. So just as an example for you to see practical what we did.
Good.
All right, we'll go through quickly go through our committee team updates. Fred's on vacation. Do we have somebody who wants to talk to this?
I'm happy to, unless Sandy wants to jump in, or we've got Devops out there too. But I'll go ahead and just jump in and chime in, folks, if there are other things to go on there. Blockchain working group. This is the granddaddy of working groups for us. It's been around for well over 3 years, and Fred Devops leads that on Fridays at 10 o'clock. And Sandy and his team are wonderful hosts at GSA, and Sandy does a great job of keeping us on track. That is a regular weekly meeting. There are regular conversations with presentations every couple of weeks or so. And I recommend you to go there and find out about the primer and the playbook and all the subgroup activities that are going on there too, including a MITRE blockchain grants project that is underway right now that Fred can help you get squared away with too. So. And then in AI, Sandy, do you want to talk about this? Put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Let me see what the slide is that you have up there. So, I mean, the key thing is what was mentioned by Jeremy earlier, and then I did mention why it was important, which is the ethical application of artificial intelligence paper, which has it's a proposal paper. It's a guide paper, and it's not meant to be prescriptive. And it is becoming important because not just at the top of our government and other governments, whether it's the White House or the Government of Canada and the Treasury Board, they're looking at how to address automation that can, in the future, become self-perpetuating, or even if you look at certain areas of automation where a number of different business rules can be lost within the structure, that it becomes very important to address in the contracting for it. What's the language that's going to be used? Because the government is not going to create these solutions. The government is going to go to those who are here and others in industry to find what is best in class that can be applied to the government. So I think that's very important what we're working on, and that paper should be coming through, and we're already looking at a professor from Johns Hopkins is leading the group. From what he told me, the former federal CIO, Suzette Kent, has joined that working group, as has Jose Arrieta, the current CIO of HHS, which is a curriculum group on AI. They're developing a curriculum and a means by which to, in a temporal manner, certify knowledge, not skills and abilities, but to be able to online certify knowledge that is relevant to the task, the knowledge that's needed to the task with the people. I think that's a very interesting working group committee that has spun up. So if anybody's interested in joining, please join us at 11 on Friday. I spent too much time talking about this, and I'm passionate about it. So thank you, Todd. Over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. All good. And Ed is out. I don't think SJ made it this morning either, but the intelligent automation team is humming along well too. They've put out their primer and their playbook, focused largely on the RPA, which is obviously we all know a very hot topic right there. They meet every other Thursday at 3 p.m. and the dial-in information is in there too. And George, do you want to speak about Devops?
Sure. So as most of you already know, earlier this year, the primer was developed and published, which provided a lot of good foundational understanding across all of the agencies, where the work is, and some of the examples of how some of these very sort of broad terms have actually exemplified themselves in the actual implementation. So we're hoping that that foundation can be built on very easily, and we're currently discussing, what's the next iteration? Is it really a playbook? Because it's not like you're buying a solution like AI or blockchain. This is more of a cultural transformation. So this past Monday, actually, we just started to talk about, okay, if we start asking the questions and gather information, should we just do another version of Primer that truly focuses on how does an agency that's sort of struggling to start get the buy-in, get the cultural transformation discussion started. Because what we're seeing is that a lot of emphasis is about tools and, building the continuous integration and continuous deployment tool chain. However, cultural transformation is not really in the forefront of the implementation plan. So it's very exciting. We're sort of gearing up to kick off this next stage. So anybody who wants to participate, would love to have you.
And welcome again, George. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
IoT drones. Well, we haven't had too much going on there. They've been on hiatus right now. So as part of our 2021 plan, we're sort of reevaluating where we stand with IoT and drones. But if you have any interest at all, obviously reach out to Jeremy and me for anything like that. Vladi Roisman over at CGI Federal has been helping to lead the IoT drones working group as well.
So our next meeting will be our ethics and bias in AI. We're going to have, like I said, the associates team come and help us host a panel, which we're looking forward to. We'll have more information on that as we get closer to the meeting.
Yeah, great stuff.
We're done.
Awesome.
All right. Todd and I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Beth and Raven, for the very insightful look into accessibility. And we're looking forward to those topics as we continue into the future.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.